All right, so I'm here with Anand, who just finished working on his final project for the game design program. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you made?
So my final project was Spellblade. It
Hmm.
was a solo project. It was a mixed reality game where essentially you would get to control the elements. So you would like have fire, chaos, water, all of these elements that you would control. And the gameplay is essentially you using hand gestures. So the game recognizes hand gestures that you do.
Hmm.
And then after you do hand gestures, you need to give a verbal command, almost like an incantation,
Yeah.
and then that will cast the spell forward. So that's the gameplay.
Okay. Awesome. And I remember when you're demonstrating it, there was like a Chat GPT integration with it as well. Why don't you talk a little bit about that part too?
So I didn't have ChatGPT integration initially. I decided to scrap it for the final project because I
Okay.
didn't want that to be my main focus, but it was fun to work on it, especially for the pitch.
Hmm.
I got into ChatGPT's API. I learned what it means to create an AI character where you kind of like code in the behaviors that the character is going to do, what kind of lines they're going to have, what they are,
Hmm.
and the AI kind of takes care of the rest. It kind of like goes based off the instructions it's given. And I basically created Eugene, which was the character that I used to perform my pitch.
Yeah.
And that was a fun little side project. And moving forward, I'll definitely be reintegrating that into the game.
Awesome. And for when you're working on the game, obviously when you're making something for VR, it's quite different than making something for like PC or console, right? What are some of the like more unique challenges that you face working on, a VR project versus what you usually did in the program, which is like a PC game or
Yeah,
a console
I would say the biggest challenge with VR right now is that it's still extremely new.
game? Hmm.
So there's very little to almost no documentation for a lot of things that you want to do. And it just comes down to a lot of trial and error. So a lot of the things that I have in the game aren't something like are bits and pieces that I've taken from like multiple tutorials all over YouTube. And a lot of it was just piecing things together like sandbox and hoping it works and putting more and more duct tape on it until it becomes something functional.
Right on, yeah.
And thankfully I did get it to a point where I was able to make it functional, but hopefully technology does get to a point where things get a lot better for VR development, and I can definitely see a lot of potential in it as well. Like right now we still have like clunky headsets that you need to like put on to enter like the VR world, but I can easily foresee there being like maybe like contact lenses that you just like put in and no one knows you're in VR right now, but you could
Hmm.
just see Eugene standing in the room with you and you could be casting spells, and what everyone else would just see is like, ah, you know?
Hmm.
So
And so when you also talked about like you talk about your game using hand gestures, right? So standard VR controls is you hold a controller, right? What did you use to track hand gestures?
so VR actually does have, or sorry, Meta does have its own plugin for hand gesture detection called Meta Hands or VR Hands, something like that. And essentially, it kind of detects your hands placements, what symbols you do, and each finger has its own like constraints. There's
Okay.
like a pinch, there's like a bend radius, there's like a degree of bending. So you have to like basically make the hand gesture yourself, calculate the radius and the bending for each finger, and then code that in. And then when the software detects that that's the exact constraints that has been followed, that's the hand gesture that's been created. So that's kind of how the hand gestures thing works now.
So as part of your project, you had to basically design your own hand gestures, right?
Yeah.
How did you arrive at like hand gestures that worked? What did you find through testing? Like how did you arrive? And in general, like your whole design process, like what was that for the game?
So obviously, hand gestures immediately leads you to Naruto, which is obviously an anime that I grew up on. And it's always been like you make a hand gesture, you say something cool, and then something cool happens right after.
Hmm.
And this has been something that I've always wanted to bring to life. And another anime again, going back to animes that really inspired me was Sword Art Online,
Oh
where
yeah.
essentially you were able to go into like a virtual world and escape from real life. And I kind of want it's always been my passion to kind of like bring that to real life. So when I got into like this course and I got to study VR development, that really was something that I immediately decided to jump on. And yeah, that was my inspiration for hand gestures. I basically started trying like different hand gestures. Some of them unfortunately were more easier to recognize than others because the software still isn't at a point where, for example, if I did a hand gesture like this, the camera can't see what my fingers are doing behind my hand, so it just assumes that they're doing this instead of this. So the
Hmm.
hand gestures don't work. So I had to specifically pick hand gestures that were like very visible to the camera, and that's kind of what we ended up going with. So there was a little bit of mix of what looks cool and what works, and trying to find the balance with that was kind of like my key to getting into hand gestures for the game.
I imagine there was like a lot of play testing, right?
Oh,
for getting those hand gestures to work.
yeah, sorry to interrupt, but one other thing is, uh, the testing process is very construed for VR development because there's no way to test mixed reality
Mm-hmm.
in the actual editor. So what you have to do is every single time you want to test a build, you have to build the entire APK, put it onto your headset, and then test it out. And the MetaQuest 3 with mixed reality right now, the battery life is probably max to max an hour. After an hour of coding, I have to go back and charge the headset, do something else in the meantime, and then come or do some other coding, come back, test it again. And that was kind of like the life cycle. My headset probably got charged like 200 to 300 times during the entire coding process. So,
You're getting a lot of use out of it though, right? Yeah.
oh yeah, for sure.
And so now that you've graduated, where do you want to like kind of what part of the industry do you want to work in? Do you want to work like PC or stay with VR? What studios are you looking at?
So this course definitely sparked my passion in VR, and my immediate goal is to try and jump into the VR industry. My end goal is to have my own company and have like a game that I can call my own,
Right
which
on.
is going to be a VR or mixed reality game. And I want to see people enjoying that game on a daily basis. Maybe there's like just like how Pokemon Go has like meetups where people get together and like play the
Mm-hmm.
game. I want people to have like meetups with my game where they all get to in a park and they like do like questing together where they all have like headsets on and they like combine spells. One of them is like a support character who casts healing spells for the other character who's fighting, and anyone from the outside who doesn't know about it just sees three kids just jumping around. Yeah, that's kind of like my vision. As far as studios goes, I definitely know I won't be able to jump immediately into my own company. So I can't immediately like put my finger in the name. It was like Warp something. They were the company that's working on Blade and Sorcery.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah.
That's a company I definitely want to try and join as well. And then the company that made Beat Saber,
Mm-hmm.
that's another one. Basically, any of the popular VR games out there, especially Skyrim VR, is another one that I want to maybe see if I can join the team for. And any upcoming VR games, stuff like that. Basically, just jumping into the VR industry is kind of like my goal. But if I'm not able to immediately get a job in VR, I would probably go into like a PC game first and then transition from there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, when you're working with VR, what engine did you use? Because I know
Uh,
both of them are kind of trying to push their VR packages.
Yeah, Unreal Engine is definitely getting their VR engine up right now. The biggest flaw with Unreal Engine is if you even get the graphics up to a slightly high amount, the game just starts completely lagging a lot. And Unreal Engine is an engine that always puts graphics forward first, which is why it can make such amazingly like good-looking PC games. But unfortunately, VR headsets, the technology isn't at a point where it can support the graphics.
Mhm.
So it's very difficult to make a VR game in Unreal. So Unity, I would say, currently is the engine that I used and is probably leading in the VR development scene right now.
Yeah, I would assume like because VR renders everything twice per eye, right? So it's kind of almost yeah, you have to make your project super lightweight, almost kind of like working for mobile, right?
Mm.
Especially since a lot of VR headsets now have the cordless function, which is basically it's a mobile
Yeah.
processor in a headset. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
and
Thank
best
you
of
so
luck to you,
much.
Anand.
You too. Take
All
care.
right.